Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our 17th Eurocommerce webinar. Today, we are pleased to hold a discussion on how retailers and wholesalers and partners can help integrating Ukrainian refugees into the European labor market. This discussion takes place in the framework of the Pact for Skills, which we are currently developing as part of the retail ecosystem. And in fact, this is our first such activity today, so we're quite happy about it. The Pact for Skills is an important means for us to highlight the importance of skills and training to support recovery and transformation in our ecosystem, building on good practice at national and company level. We will aim to formally launch our Pact for Skills in the autumn, so more to come. Today's discussion will focus on how the Pact for Skills can provide a means to exchange good practice and experience in relation to the integration of Ukrainian refugees into the European labor market. And we hope you will find this inspiring and a good source of information. Our sector, retail and wholesale, has expressed its deep shock after the Russian invasion in Ukraine and has undertaken major efforts to support the people of Ukraine. For instance, through significant donations and deliveries of essential products, but also in helping refugees fleeing their country. More information about the variety, the diversity of activities can be found on our website, commerceforukraine.com. Retail and wholesale is the largest private sector employer in Europe, with 26 million people with diverse backgrounds and educational levels. We are present as a sector in all European regions, in large cities and small towns, so across the whole territory. We are in a unique position to help addressing the challenge of providing Ukrainian refugees with a much needed perspective in terms of jobs and training, and allowing them to be financially independent and contributing and being part of the local communities where they live during their stay in the European Union. And the challenge is massive. According to the European Commission, since the beginning of the war, over 6.5 million people have left Ukraine and reached the EU, and about 3 million have registered for temporary protection, and the majority of them are women with children. From the information available so far, only a relatively small number of those of working age have entered the European labor market or registered with public employment services. During our discussion today, we will hear insights from Inke Group, which is part of IKEA, into their impressive work on how they are providing real skilling and employment opportunities to refugees. We will also hear from the European Commission, Junior Achievement, and our social partner, Uni-Europa. And last but not least, I'm very pleased to leave you in the very capable hands of my colleague, Christian Boyton, who will moderate the discussion. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Welcome to everybody here. Welcome to everybody who is viewing us from all over Europe. I quickly have to mention that the event will be recorded, and I think we're happy to be here today with a majority female panel. It's also something I think in Brussels that's becoming more and more a thing. Now we will start with Julie Fionda, who is Deputy Head of Unit in the Commission's DG Employment, who will be discussing, or we will be presenting the policy guidance of 14 June on basically how to integrate Ukrainian refugees into the labor market from basically a European perspective. So, Julie, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here and talk to you this afternoon. As has been said, since the beginning of Russia's war against Ukraine, we've seen a massive outflow of people from Ukraine to EU member states, and of course even more displaced internally within Ukraine. Probably something like 20% of the Ukrainian population has come to the EU, which is a huge challenge. So on the 4th of March, the EU activated the Temporary Protection Directive. And besides the legal right to stay in an EU member state from an initial period of 1 year, which is extendable to up to 3 years, beneficiaries of temporary protection have access to education and training, labour market, healthcare, housing, and social care, social welfare directly. The Commission's also published regular information, also in Ukrainian, on a webpage to help those displaced from Ukraine. We've also published guidance specifically in the areas covered by the Temporary Protection Directive. And on the 14th of June, we adopted a communication on guidance for access to the labour market, as has been said, access to the labour market, vocational education and training, and adult learning. And that broadly covers Articles 12, 13, and part of 14. The other part of 14, of course, is for children's access. First message, perhaps, I think rapid and effective labour market integration is important for both the host community and for the people fleeing the war. As we've heard, around 3.5 million people so far have registered for temporary protection. Of those, 7.5 million people who fled, but only a relatively small share have entered the labour market or have registered with the Public Employment Services. This can be for a number of reasons, and we also expect that number to rise in the coming weeks and next months. I would also recall there that Ukrainian citizens and long-term residents have the right to come to the EU and to move freely for 90 days without visa. And now we're kind of coming to the end of that 90-day period for many of them. So they will have perhaps moved to the country where they want to register and start that registration process. Of course, also many women with children, so they will also be kind of looking to get kids first into school, and employment opportunities can then follow. So the aim of the 14th of June communication is to set out concrete measures that member states can put in place on the basis of what we've learned from previous experience and best practices in migration crises. The communication also lists some tools that are available at the EU level and projects that have been funded that can support that kind of integration. It also talks about funding that's available at the EU level in order to support integration measures. I think clearly the successful labour market integration also depends upon measures taken in other areas, and that's access to housing, including access to healthcare and including mental health care as well, social protection support and services, and early childhood education and care, as well as schooling, which I just mentioned. And we're working on several fronts on these areas. So a couple of words on the specifics. So the beneficiaries of the Temporary Protection Directive have the direct right to access EU labour market, vocational training and adult learning. So that's direct access, no visa required, directly enforceable, no other paperwork, let's say. In terms of employment and self-employment, the guidance itself invites member states to provide information on the support available to people fleeing Russia's war against Ukraine, such as career guidance, counselling, and protection against discrimination. And it comes in addition to the existing legal obligation to inform people of their rights. There is a risk of exploitation, and we want to make sure that we do everything that we can to avoid exploitation in the labour market, and also to enable people to get into positions which are commensurate with their skills. The guidance also sets out how to facilitate the integration into the labour market of the beneficiaries of temporary protection and adequate protection under national law. We can come back to that later if needed. And that includes encouraging people to register themselves with the public employment services. It includes things like reflecting the needs of people fleeing the war in the work of the authorities and the employment services, so paying particular attention to the needs of women and childcare, recruiting people in sectors where there are specific shortages or where they can also support others fleeing Ukraine, including with examples of with the language being a particular issue. It also includes calls upon member states to provide support to employers hiring people fleeing, and allowances for the creation of startups, and to open up entrepreneurship and support programs to new arrivals. We're also calling upon member states to provide the broadest possible access to the labour market, and to support people, including those with disabilities, and in particular to access. The guidance invites member states to ensure that people's skills and qualifications can be valued, in particular, and assessed and swiftly recognised where that's needed, irrespective of whether the documentation about their qualifications is in place or whether that needs to be reconstituted. Support can involve preparing CVs, testing skills where necessary, and also retrieving missing qualifications, bearing in mind that the Ukrainian authorities are working still on this front. Some tools have been made available in Ukrainian at the European Union level, and that includes things like the skills profile tool for third country nationals, which can help in this process. And the guidance calls upon member states to ensure swift access to things like initial vocational education and training, including apprenticeships, and targeted upskilling and reskilling opportunities for people. There is also a section which calls upon member states to help people who maybe didn't complete initial education and training, to help them to continue that or to finish their studies, such as in higher education. I would add maybe that the Ukrainian population is generally very well qualified. You're looking at 97% of the population has a school leaving certificate or higher. Something like 50% of men and 65% of women have a university leaving certificate, contrasted with the EU levels, which is around 46% or so. So it's overall it's a very educated and qualified population. The guidance, perhaps last couple of things, the guidance recalls the different funds that are made available to member states to support reception of people and to support the integration of people, emergency aid, but also active labour market policies, education and training, language courses, things like that. And there we've introduced specific funding or made revisions of existing funding streams to make that money flow quicker and to be as flexible as possible, including through the CARE initiative. So I think that's probably all I would say on the guidance that we've issued on the TPD, and then I'm happy to come back later on if there are questions or comments. Thank you.
Perspective, and I think we'll definitely come back to the many things you've mentioned in your intervention. We will now quickly go on to Mercedes Gutierrez from Inca Group, part of IKEA Retail, who will present the Skills for Employment program. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us to share the experience. I don't know if we have the slides and we can share the slides. I would like to start sharing that we have been working to support the integration of refugees since many years ago. I think we took the experience in the previous crisis when the war in Syria. And of course, as always in the crisis, we started with donation, supporting with products to create places to call home. But in 2016, one store in Switzerland, one IKEA store, decided to onboard 2 refugees every 6 months to support them to practice the language and then to provide them some kind of labor experience in Switzerland. And 5 years ago, we discovered that 90 stores around in 14 countries, we were doing something similar without any clear structure, without any support from Global, without any way to measure the success. So we decided to take this experience and then to create a blueprint that we have scales in many countries. If you move to the next slide, I would like to start saying that for us, that we are now in a journey to become a more people and planet positive. And one of the commitments is that we want to create a positive impact for everyone across the value chain and beyond. And this includes about the role we want to play in the local communities. For us, being as diverse as our communities are is part of our commitment. And now we see that refugees are in many communities where we are operating. So this is why, if you move to the next slide and taking the experience from this one story in Switzerland, 3 years ago, we decided to take a pledge and a commitment with the UNHCR and the Global Refugees Forum to support at least 2,500 refugees and asylum seekers in 30 countries, providing them some skills for employment, language practice, and work experience in 30 countries by the end of this natural year, 2022. Also, we have our colleagues from Inter-IKEA Group, the owners of the products development, that they are taking some commitments to support the integration of refugees in the supply chain. And also that IKEA Foundation, our philanthropy arm, that is taking a commitment to invest in countries where is the biggest number of refugees in the world, and it's not in Europe, it's in the poorest countries in the world, in Ethiopia, Uganda, and other countries. But maybe the most important commitment we took at that time is not only to support the integration of refugees, is to really using our reach and our brand to really contribute to make a significant change in the narrative around refugees that in many cases is connected with fear, is with concerns that new people are coming to my country to take my jobs, to take the money from the government. So how we can really show that integration of refugees is not only a humanistic approach, it's good for business and society. If you move to the next slide, today, I'm really proud to share that we have supported at least 1,600 participants in 24 countries. Last year, 62% got a job at IKEA or in other companies. Not everyone would like to keep working for IKEA, but it's the program that we are supporting them with 6 months of training program in the show floor of the stores. And after the program, we invite them to apply for existing vacancies. What we can see in 2 years of experience that the retention is much higher than average. So this means that we are recruiting very loyal and talented and resilient co-workers for IKEA. We have seen in the way we have implemented the program, and you will see how we have done in the next slide, we have increased the positive perception for co-workers about IKEA as a diverse and inclusive company. And also we have built a strong connection working with many partners at local level and the global level about IKEA as a trusted partner. If you move to the next slide, in order to scale up this solution from Switzerland to 24 countries, we designed a special toolkit, like a kind of blueprint that has 7 steps. And the most important steps is the first 3, is that you need to start engaging your co-workers, your managers, your leaders, and understand the local community. We need to create global commitments, but we cannot be creating the impact from Sweden. Every country, every local community have different challenges, different partners, different situation, sometimes different legislation, different role of the governments. So each country have different setups. And the most important thing is that to prepare internally to take the challenge. This is not business as usual. We need to understand that. So we need to take a commitment from the top management and then to implement this in a smaller scales and then to scale across the countries in different stores. If you move to the next slide, I'm putting here some learnings about it's important to have the top management. And why? Because that's something that is not easy sometimes is how to manage this bureaucracy and additional challenges like cultural challenges when you are integrating refugees. So you need to have the full support to sometimes to take decision that is to break the traditional way of doing things. We have a values-based recruitment process. So we are recruiting people based on values, not on curriculum. So for us, it was like a stress test that we are finding values people from the refugees, but also taking into account this complexity, bureaucracy, additional challenges is super easy to say no in the recruitment process. So how we supported our recruitment process, leaders and also our hiring managers to understand the challenges and to navigate in this environment. It's important to work together. This is not a normal business for us. This is why we have this ecosystem of partners. In some cases, we are working local government, regional governments, but also with local NGOs, social enterprises, and in many cases also supported by the trade unions. It's important to see how this common goal to support refugees is breaking silos across the organization, is many functions are engaged, and also that the success factor is how to identify, how to measure the success of the initiative, how the role of the co-workers supporting refugees integration, and to understand that they are the first one. They need to understand why integration of refugees is important, and also to highlight that two final learnings is really important, especially for refugees coming from different cultures, to have a multicultural training for the newcomers, but also for co-workers to understand the new culture, if you are a newcomer, a refugee, but also the new culture is coming to the store to understand different behaviors. And what we can see in the previous year is that has been quite complex to find women in the programs. Many cases they have childcare obligations. In many cases it's because cultural reasons, but we are taking the commitment to support at least 50% of women in our programs, and we will see maybe this number will increase in the next steps with more refugees coming from Ukraine. If you move to the next slide, what we are doing now as a consequence of the war in Ukraine is that we are taking all learnings from Skills for Employment, and we are now equip all recruitment offices and leaders to be prepared to be more proactive, reaching displaced people, is refugees and asylum seekers. In our cases, for all refugees and asylum seekers, we are not only focused on people from Ukraine, and to really support them with special needs, with language barriers, and with some additional challenges about bureaucracy, paperwork, to really apply for vacancies at IKEA. We have started this new framework. It's very active in countries bordering Ukraine, and especially active in Germany, also in Austria. But we will roll out this program in all countries where Inca Group is operating, because for us, recruiting refugees is an amazing good opportunity for the business and for our journey to become People and Planet Positive. And the next slide is something that is really critical for us. Is about we are really happy to see how the welcoming positive environment about people from Ukraine and refugees from Ukraine. But we must say that it's not the same situation where people are coming from different countries. So 2 years ago, we took the commitment to change the narrative, to really mobilize our co-workers, customers, to understand why refugees integration is good for the local communities, for society, and for the business. We want to mobilize even more businesses in our value chain, supplier, business partners, but also today that there are many retail companies maybe listening on today, that refugees is good for the business, is good for society, and we need to join forces together to make this happening. But also that, and I think we are happy that the European Commission is creating this easy onboarding program for people living in Ukraine, how we can really take the next steps to really creating the same pathway for all refugees around the world. Everyone deserves to have a better life, and then together we can really make it happen. So you click 2 slides more because I jammed one of them in the middle. This is why that every year in the World Refugees Day, we celebrate the resilience, the loyalty, and the hopes that many refugees have when they're coming to our countries, and to recognize that supporting refugees is good for societies, is good for the business, but also it's good for the local communities. This year, especially with a very positive empathy from everyone, we want to remind that our customers, co-workers, that we should stand for all refugees. And I think that we are happy that I will be happy to share also more details in the dialogue about these additional challenges and questions. Finally, I think that for me it's really important for us that the Pact for Skills is an amazing opportunity to really collaborate together, to really create new pathways for refugees, but also for people to upskill themselves. And also we see a strong connection with the integration of people with different backgrounds and how to increase diversity in the workforce. So I think that we together, we can really move mountains if we are able to simplify the way for many refugees to access to our labor market.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. I think indeed there's plenty of that to take away from your presentation, and it's very good that companies like IKEA and Inca are stepping up and also showing and telling what they're doing. We'll now go on to Junior Achievement Europe, that also have done have quite a few best practices to present to us. So I give the floor to Minna Mallory, who is responsible for advocacy and growth within JA Europe.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to present Junior Achievement and our work with Ukrainian refugees. I think you have the slides that you can pull up. Yes. So Junior Achievement, we work all over the world with youth and children of all ages in schools, empowering them for a successful future. So it's different programs that run during the school year with the help of a teacher and business mentor from the world of work, and teaching essential skills in entrepreneurship, in work readiness, and financial literacy. And so this year, obviously, you can go to the next slide. We have been working very much with Ukraine, in Ukraine, and also outside, because this school year, back in the autumn, we actually launched JA programs in the eastern part of Ukraine, in Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk. These photos are from February 20th, I believe, just a few days before the war started. And so we were emotionally and also professionally very much deep into the Ukrainian school system and trying to launch our programs there, with mobilizing also the ecosystem for entrepreneurship education. Now, obviously, these activities have now been put on hold, and we are shifting the activities to the western part of the country. It was mentioned already that many young people and people in general have had to be internally displaced, and actually half of children and young people in Ukraine have moved away from their original homes. You can go to the next slide. So as Junior Achievement, since we work here in Europe as well with over 40 partners from the business sector, also public authorities and policymakers like the European Commission, what we did is we aim to mobilize support through our existing partnerships and also some new ones, really to support the huge new situation that the whole of Europe was finding themselves in. Obviously, the influx of refugees into European countries meant that the young people were integrated into schools. It was mentioned by the European Commission that they were, the public authorities made the commitment to integrate and give places in the schools. So one of the supports that we could do as a non-profit working in schools was to facilitate the integration of these young people. And in a way, the reason why we also wanted to immediately do as much as we can for our hands-on entrepreneurship programs, because these really develop not only business skills and the sort of technical skills in a sector, for instance, but also really gives hope and gives a purpose for the future, which is very important also for the mental health and for general well-being of refugees that have experienced extremely stressful situations and need the kind of boost in confidence, in self-esteem, etc. So we really, even if this crisis happened in the middle of the school year, in the emergency, we and our organizations at the national level have really been able to integrate already quite a few young people who have arrived from Ukraine into this year's program as well. And then now we are doing all we can to prepare also, of course, for the next school year, which hopefully will be a little bit more organized and there will be more structured processes in place. So we've also worked with schools to mobilize the support from our partners for different kinds of donations, for instance, computers, tablets, and stationery in the immediate need that they had. Translating different educational materials has been very important. So since we were already working in Ukraine, we had some basic programs already translated for the Ukrainian market. And we then shared all these and developed them further through an e-learning platform. So I think one of the key things is that at least at the school level, and probably employers and the societies in general, face in all European countries very similar issues. And so what we try to do is that every country and every junior achievement organization does not have to do the same work from scratch, but we pool the resources. We try to exchange as much as possible. We've had regular meetings and virtual calls across the network to understand who is doing what and what can be used that the immediate neighboring countries of Ukraine have developed very early, and that can be used then also for other countries in Europe who would later on be receiving also many of the refugees at the school level. We also support teachers, both in and outside Ukraine. So we run teacher training programs. That's also something we did in Ukraine. And now what we've been doing in the countries hosting Ukrainian refugees, we've been able to identify at a very small scale still, but at least a few teachers, so displaced teachers, and we have even employed a few of them and retrain them for JA programs so that they can continue teaching either online or on site towards Ukrainian youth who are also displaced. And then also we train, I mentioned the volunteers from the World of Work. So Ukrainian speaking volunteers, we have been also training them to deliver these educational programs that we have, mostly digitally, whether they are in Ukraine or not. Of course, due to the COVID pandemic, we had already put in place digital delivery of our programs. And we had very much hoped that at the end of the pandemic, we could go back to on-site also in Ukraine. But now the digital delivery became very handy. And what is also a strategic focus for us is really the workforce development of the youth. So we, generally speaking, not only for Ukraine or Ukrainian refugees, but we really want to bridge the gap between the skills learned at school and skills needed in the labor market. And that's really the whole purpose of our programs. You can go to the next slide. So our ambition and our plan for this year, based on the partnerships we have put in place, is to reach around 16,000 Ukrainian refugees through these different programs that I mentioned. We've raised around €500,000 only for this Ukraine support through the partnership that I mentioned, and we're active now in 15 countries in Europe out of the 41 where we operate. You can go to the next one, just to show a snapshot of our partners. I'll just mention Project Management Institute because it's a very interesting partnership we have across Europe in 23 countries. And they, for instance, have been on board to provide project management training in Ukrainian for Ukrainian refugees. So it's a very good example of how the skills from the employer side can be concretely brought into the classroom and into the schools that Junior Achievement operates in. You can go to the next slide. And so in terms of a more longer-term socioeconomic integration of the Ukrainian refugees, we will focus on 4 pillars. One is to prepare a guide to inform and guide employers. It was mentioned by the European Commission speaker earlier, really to how to integrate and engage Ukrainian refugees in the workplace. Then the whole career and repositioning, CV support, job interview training, etc., is something we do with the young people. And the training programs are through our JA programs that have these job-specific skills, but also the soft skills, language skills, and digital skills that are all brought together, blended in these hands-on programs. And finally, through these partners, we connect to concrete opportunities for employment, apprenticeships, and other mentoring opportunities through our partners. So if we have a big global organization, we can together identify the places where they can offer further opportunities. And I think we've reached this last slide. So yes, we definitely see the diversity of the workplace as well as a huge asset in this crisis, and we look forward to collaborating with the retail sector and generally to build this Pact for Skills in the retail sector together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minna. It's very enriching. We will quickly move on to Oliver Reutig, who is the Regional Secretary of our social partner at EU level for the last 30 years, Uni Europa. Thank you. Oliver, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. And also, Crystal, thank you for the invitation. First of all, I would like to start by really condemning the massacre yesterday of Kremenchuk. And as you know, that was a supermarket, a big mall, and that falls into our industry. So it is really not only an attack on Ukrainian people, but also on commerce and the ability for us providing the services and customers actually getting the goods they need for their living. So first of all, I think our thoughts are all with the victims of this tragedy and their families. The take for us is really simple. We need to see how we can help as social partners, and this is really about the discussion we have today. I want to make 3 points. First, the European trade union movement, and really together with civil society and governments, have mobilized throughout Europe to assist the newly arrived refugees. For workers, it is very hard to navigate the labor market and to know one's right in a different country and a different language. Refugees are very vulnerable. Some weeks ago, I was in Poland, and I was surprised how good Poland has dealt with the refugees. They are not in emergency shelters. They are not on the streets. They mostly have really come under with families, with ordinary people. The reason of the crisis, what we wanted to do is giving concrete help. And for this, we used our Central European Organizing Center, and there we launched a project called Unions Help Refugees. Essentially, it is a helpline which provides a space for Ukrainian workers to get assistance in their language through a Telegram channel, a Facebook page, a website, and a phone line. The colleagues help them to get help when they arrive and to find good jobs. They provide them with information, answers about Polish labor law and their rights. It is about empowering the workers. The colleagues help them and intervene if employers do not respect their workers' rights. Some examples I wanted to give you of the exploitation which is taking place. It's long hours, it's non-payment of salaries, and they are all forms of harassment. So now let's be clear that this is not specific to Ukraine. We have the same experiences in refugees throughout Europe. This is one of the characteristics when you belong to some new arrivals with their vulnerability. The second point I want to make is we should assume that most of the over 5 million Ukrainians that have found refuge in Europe, largely in Poland, will eventually go back. Refugees are not a solution to labor shortages we have in Europe. We do not want to deprive Ukraine of workers in order to fill gaps in Western European labor markets. We have to do this by other means. The third point for me is providing refugees with skills they need to succeed in our labor markets can only be a secondary aim, because they won't stay enough that we actually can do this. For us, a priority must be making sure that there's no exploitation. The refugees have a right for decent pay, decent working conditions, and decent job security, as much as all other workers. We as trade unions and employers, governments and the EU, society at large, should really come together so that refugees are not second-class workers. With the action that the European Union has undertaken, we are, I think, on a good way, because we set up the legal framework for doing so. For other refugees, it's much more difficult, and they very often end up in the black market, which, of course, we don't want. And in Ukraine, I think we push down the risk that this is happening. Simply put, normal working standards should apply to Ukrainian refugees too. That should be the basic principle how to approach it. In conclusion, we have seen it during the pandemic. Collective bargaining and strong social partners, social dialogue, build resilience in crisis. Social dialogue at all levels, therefore, is key. And that is really also coming back to the link to the Pact for Skills. We have a challenge in Europe. We have a challenge with skills and with job shortages. So working together as social partners through collective bargaining, through social dialogue at all levels is really the way forward. And how as we practice with Eurocommerce, that's really the way forward. And we will see over the next months how we really can do this and support this common endeavor to really do the necessary upskilling of our society. But for me, what it is key, I mean, it's a joint activity of everyone, and the social partners as Uni-Europa and Eurocommerce in the sector and our national affiliates play really a key role, because they are in the center of the labor market. They together know best how issues can be addressed and where really the problems and solutions lie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver, for bringing us this perspective, and also, of course, reminding us of the importance of social dialogue at all levels to solve many challenges, including the issue we're facing today. So now, bringing back to the panel, for everyone, I have a number of questions. We're going to start with Mercedes from IMCA. Could you tell us, I mean, it's very interesting, your presentation, when tackling integration refugees, integrating Ukrainian refugees into the labor force, were there any obstacles, or what were the most obvious obstacles you had to tackle, and what worked well? And are there any lessons learned in this regards?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that we don't have a specific learnings from refugees from Ukraine. We have for all countries. I think the biggest challenge is the language, of course, barrier, and depends of the country of origin, could be the cultural integration to understand behaviors and ways of working. So this is why that as we have this long experience supporting refugees, when we designed the toolkit for the countries to implement the solution, we put that to understand first the local community reality. So who is supporting refugees in the markets is the government plus social NGOs, so to understand better the challenges they have to design a plan ad hoc for them, because we are experts on home furnishing, but not in refugees integration, and this is very important to highlight. And then we put in place is a mandatory training, is multicultural training, especially for co-workers to understand the new culture is coming, and also for the newcomers coming to a country with different culture. We have, for example, challenges with some refugees that they don't understand why a woman can be a manager for cultural reasons, or why women can work. So we need to start from the beginning to secure we have the same understanding. And then, of course, that how to integrate the language training with work experience, and also have the support, the social support and psychological support. That is really important to have the right partner, because we shouldn't forget that in many cases people have highly impacted psychologically because the war, and we need to support that. And sometimes the companies, we don't have the tools in place. This is why it's important to keep working together. An additional challenging, and let's see what's happened with the war in Ukraine, because as you mentioned before, is the majority of the refugees are women. It's quite complex to have women refugees in our programs because they have additional responsibilities for cultural reasons about take care of children, but also for some backgrounds that they are don't used to work in the countries they will come from. But in this case, we recommend to have additional programs ad hoc focus on women to create some ad hoc solutions for them, because taking a general approach will not fix it. And finally, I would say the biggest challenges for us in these 3 years of experience about how to talk about this externally. We have an amazing market managers, country managers pushing for the program internally, but it has been very uncomfortable to talk externally because the risk of political discussion, religion discussion, and we need to find a way how to bring positive stories about refugees integration, because this will create a new narrative, a new environment for more companies to step in. So these are the big challenges I can share after 2 years of trying to integrate refugees.
Thank you very much. Just allow me to follow up on that. As a large multinational retailer active in so many countries, and you've already mentioned that the cultural context depends a lot. How does that work, and how does, for example, the Pact for Skills, how could it help in this regard?
Yeah, I think that we see that the good thing for us is that IKEA stores are equal in all markets. So we need to fix external context. And we see that the biggest difference in different countries across Europe is about the role of the governments and the role of the NGOs. In some places, you can see a very proactive role to work together, government, companies, and NGOs, to secure efficiency in the way they are investing resources to secure language and training, work experience. And we can see that in many countries also the government is taking an active role to secure part of the salaries, project leading costs, to take the over costs that sometimes the companies we are taking. And then we have the extreme situation where in some countries you don't expect any support from the government and it's the NGOs taking full responsibility. But I would say in general, you cannot do this project alone. You need always a partner. It's quite complex, especially to understand the bureaucracy behind. I think we are happy that now with Ukrainian refugees, everything is easier, but it's not the same case for refugees and asylum seekers. And the second challenge is, or the difference we can see, is about the empathy from society. You can see a very positive empathy now because the war in Ukraine, but it's quite complex when you need to start creating a new narrative, especially internally with co-workers, because the narrative around refugees is not so positive in some markets, and you need to explain why it's good for them and why it's good for the business. And about the Pact for Skills, I think is really an amazing opportunity. I think that we have, everyone in silos, we have good intention. And I think maybe the Pact for Skills create this togetherness to really find solutions how to be more efficient, to upskill people. I think it's important to integrate also integration and anti-discrimination, especially for refugees in general, how we can really upskill everyone, it doesn't matter where they come from, and how to do together in a way is more efficient for the market, so we can really find the talent we need, but also to secure that the investment we are doing from different angles is creating the biggest outcome together.
Thank you very much. Then we go over to one of the, of course, NGOs and partners that we work with, which is Junior Achievement Europe. And we have heard a lot about refugees and about also the gender dimension in that. But of course, many of the refugees are actually young people. And so the question now is, how can we best empower and integrate these young people? And do you see as JA Europe that there are differences between countries in this respect?
Yeah, so for us, what is the most important is really to offer the prospect of opportunity, because that's linked to the prospect of hope. And in this respect, skills development is very important, I would argue. And I think when we think about this young segment, so in our biggest group of students is the upper secondary. So youth between 15 and 17, 18 years of age. This is critical age for their future. So we are not just talking generally about what skills are needed. We are talking about a youth population whose education has been disrupted by war. Their school is closed or bombed. They have had to leave to a new country. So it's really critical that they are integrated into the schools and that they very quickly get meaningful opportunities, because if these young people are not in schools, where will they be? If they are not offered opportunities for further development, prospects of future studies or employment or apprenticeships, where will they be? And I think it's a question for the whole European society, and not just specific sectors. So we need, indeed, I think it's been said by many speakers, big partnerships and this ecosystem approach, because everyone is filling their role. So we need the policymakers to be on board and the right framework for these kinds of opportunities. We are the practitioners. We can make that happen. We link the schools to the employers. So so it's really about concrete opportunities for skills development, so that these people at the human level can feel as parts of the society. And even if indeed they will not all decide to stay in their current host countries, they will go back and rebuild Ukraine. And that Ukrainian economy will be completely different than it was before the 24th of February. So there is in any case this huge need to really tap on this talent, because we also feel talent, we believe that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. So we must make sure that also the most disadvantaged get these opportunities. And so the Pact for Skills can play this role of really creating a framework for that kind of collaboration. So that's why we want to be a part of that and contribute in the way that we can to bring the world of work into the classroom and link those 140,000 teachers that we work with in our programs, and to see what we can do with that network, linking them to the other networks that exist at the European level. And I think in terms of the differences between countries, it's quite early to make really analytical assessment. I think the language indeed plays a key role. It's in some regions has been easier or more difficult. Perhaps also the sort of cultural in Eastern Europe, for instance, there's been really the level of solidarity very overwhelming. Even at the level of symbols in the city that you can see in different European countries is very different. How many Ukrainian flags you count? So I think there are differences, but they can be really due to different issues, and I think we need to see a little bit longer term.
Okay, and we're running short on time, but we still have a lot of questions. And so I'm going to quickly ask our remaining panelists 2 questions, and I would like for them to answer us, within 1 minute or so. We'll start with Oliver. You've mentioned the existing skills partnerships in many of our member states between employers and trade unions, and how could this be leveraged? You've already mentioned Poland, but do you have another example? Oh, I think we have to unmute Oliver.
Yeah, I got it. We started the project in Poland. We are launching now something similar for Romania. So that is one of the other countries at the border. I mean, the challenge there, especially if I look at Poland, of course, is, let's say, social dialogue at the national level is not one of the most advanced in Europe. So I think we have a challenge in that regard to really reach out. Then there's the other point, doing it through multinational companies in the first place, where we as European could have a role. One important point, however, is, and there I see a role for the Pact for Skills, is how do we support Ukraine when the war is over and reintegrate the refugees at home? I mean, we're talking at the moment about as if, there are young, just as an example, young Ukrainians coming over the border and then looking for an apprenticeship, and then in 3 years or so they're finished with it. I mean, we all hope that the war is finished much earlier. So that means if they go into an apprenticeship, they actually have to decide, do they continue it in Poland or do they get back? The second thing, which we in the West too often forget, if you're a man in Ukraine, you can't just leave the country. You have to become a soldier and defend the country. So what is the situation in this regard? So there are a lot of issues which are not that straightforward as we think. Okay. So I think for the Pact for Skills, and also as a candidate country, we really have to see how we can leverage the Pact for Skills for rebuilding Ukraine and using it actually to, in particular, look at the refugees, the millions of people who have left, to reintegrate them and give them the right skills, so that they are not a drain, but really a support for the future Ukraine.
I think we take that on board. We will see how we get there in the coming months when we hammer out the final program on the Pact for Skills. And then for Julie Fionda, I would like to ask what you think the EU could do beyond the policy guidance of 14th of June. And also, like, you've heard a lot of best practices today and a lot of good examples. Can these structures set up for Ukrainian refugees actually be put to good use for other types of refugees that might come in the future?
Yeah, I think as many have said, we have to work in partnership, and on this side, on the education and training side of things, skills development, member states are very much in the lead here, and we need to make sure that all of the agencies are on board and working together, and this is kind of at the heart of what the Pact for Skills is about, is having everyone contribute in a way that adds the most value in providing opportunities, and that's opportunities for people who are in the domestic population in Europe, and opportunities also for those who are seeking refuge in Europe, whether it be on a shorter term perspective or whether it be on a longer term perspective. Many of the things that have been explored for Ukrainian refugees, if we call them that, although the status is slightly different, is not so very different from refugees more broadly. And to be honest, is not so very different from domestic population. And then, of course, when we talk about the Ukrainian people displaced from Ukraine, they have, as has been said, essentially the directive guarantees them the same rights as the domestic population. So I think there that the kind of the power is in our hands to work together to see what kind of opportunities that we can make available, and how, working together, we can do more than we can work separately.
Okay, thank you very much. I will hand over to my Director General, Christelle Verberg, for the concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. And really, I thought it was a very highly inspiring session that we had. Very well done. Very warm thank you to all our panelists. This was the first session under the Pact for Skills, and it does show that there is a lot of value in bringing experts to illustrate and share their experience. So I would really warmly thank everyone, and value the quality of the exchange. I mean, certainly as a sector and as an organization, we do strongly condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as a sector, as I have said in my introduction, we stand ready, and we are in a unique position to help addressing the challenge. But as we have heard during the session, we can help, but we cannot do this alone. And I think that's a very important key message or takeaway message for everybody. I would like really to thank Julie from the European Commission for sharing the tools and the mechanisms, the support mechanisms that the Commission is putting forward to everybody to use and to share. I think it is important to keep on talking about it, spreading the message. I also would like to thank Mercedes, Mina, and Oliver for sharing the highly relevant experience that you're bringing to the discussion, and also your experience about what works and what doesn't work. What are the risks that we need to be aware of? The three of you have brought in their very relevant element in the discussion. As I said, I mean, one key takeaway message is the importance of partnership, working together locally with the local authorities, with NGOs, with the trade unions. Very, very important. The Pact for Skills comes as a highly relevant environment to help continue the discussion. To help continue the discussion, and it comes across as a very appropriate mechanism to leverage and share the good practice on skills development and training, and how we can use this for the integration of refugees in Ukrainian refugees in our sector, and more globally as well. There's certainly value to exchange with other sectors. So just wanted to also note that the session was recorded. It will be available soon. I hope that you all found it a very inspiring session, and we very much look forward to pursuing the dialogue, bringing more of those good practice examples and integrating them in our Pact for Skills for retail and wholesale. On that note, thank you very much to all, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.